Oh boy, now things are starting to get a little bit interesting. Okay, this is House of X number 2, and it follows, at least in the reading order of both House of X and Powers of X, it follows Powers of X number 1. Now, in Powers of X, there was some seeds planted there, and this kind of fleshes it out a little bit better, or I should say this kind of adds a little bit more context to what we see initially in Powers of X. So Powers of X lays a little bit of the groundwork. There's this journey across time that's occurring within Powers of X, right? But there's one thing that's pretty key in Powers of X, and it has to do with a particular scene in Powers of X. And what's interesting, I saw in some other Marvel comics, is that a lot of them would add, and I'm going to go to the page real quick, but then I'll kind of give an overall of what I think here. But let me see if I can find it here real quick. There is a particular part in this book that I have to kind of reference here, because if you read other Marvel comics, you probably saw an ad for it, and it said something along the lines of, this is the most important or the most key scene in this storyline, in House of X, in Powers of X, whatever. And it showed this page right here, that's also in Powers of X, but it didn't have any of the dialogue bubbles, but it said this is the most like key part of the whole thing. And once you read House of X number 2, you understand why. So what's going on from the very beginning here is kind of, they tell a little bit of a backstory, and this is where my emotions get mixed, right? Because Moira McTaggart, they pretty much are rewriting her history here, or I should say Jonathan Hickman is pretty much rewriting her history here. Now, I'm not sure, I didn't read House of M, although it is kind of referenced here, and maybe somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if this is Jonathan Hickman's doing, but it seems like it. But Moira McTaggart is apparently a mutant who can reincarnate, and they kind of explain how that works within the first couple of pages here. She's lived a couple different lives, and this, like I said, adds a lot more context to Powers of X. I'm not sure how I feel about this, because she went for however many years that she was around, maybe close to 40 years at this point that she's been, or over 40 years at this point that she's been established within the Marvel universe, and you don't know exactly, like, she's just a human, right? She's just a person that is a scientist, very smart, genius, but you don't know a lot of her, you don't know any of this, I should say. You just know, like, the stuff that she's kind of been through, having Proteus as a son. Apparently, she's lived all these other lives where she had different kids and then was reincarnated. So it's kind of like these different timelines because of her reincarnations that she's lived. And it's very, it's interesting. I will say that it's something that kept me engaged while I was reading it. I liked it, but at the same time, again, you're rewriting the history of a, not a super, she's important in the sense of the X-Men story, I guess. She's one of Xavier's longtime allies, at times, also one of his former romances, lovers, however you want to say it. But there's all these different scenarios that play out where Moira McTaggart, during the course of one of her lives, she took different paths where she either allied with Xavier or didn't, and did things differently each time. But what's key, probably the most key thing is that you find out is that after I think her 10th reincarnation or whatever, there's something that finally happens that really gets her to, and I'm saying this, the reason why I'm not really going too much into detail what's going on in this comic book is because this is one that I really am trying not to spoil, although I know I'm showing stuff. This is one that I would say definitely read it. But during her, I think, 10th reincarnation, that's the one that does it for her. That's the one that makes her become radicalized, which is this one right here. And again, you just got to read it, because to me, this has been the best one I've read so far. And again, I have mixed feelings about it. I'm not sure if this is the way to go, but it definitely has my attention much more than the previous issues. And like I said, it adds quite a bit of context to Powers of X, and now it's like, oh wow, okay, so where is this all gonna go? And because of what happened, because of her, she reveals, I guess finally, she reveals the fact to Charles Xavier that she is a mutant. That's what there's a point in time where there's certain decisions that are made during one of her lifetimes that finally ends up, and I guess it's the 10th lifetime for her as well as Charles Xavier, where, or I should say, no, one of her previous lifetimes is where she gets radicalized, and then another is when Charles Xavier becomes radicalized, and I guess that's what is the impetus for all of this, for the House of X, is because of something that he experiences. Because once he reads her mind here, that's when everything like becomes clear. That's when everything's like, oh snap, okay. And I guess that's what's going to lead to House of X, what leads to the course of events. And as we saw in Powers of X, one could expect that, I guess, because of all this, these are what's happening in these different times, 100 years from the future, 1,000 years from the future, is a result, or it would lead you to assume that it's a result of what's happening in present day. But here's the interesting thing about this. This kind of leads to a little bit of a plot device because of the fact that she can change time. She could basically change the course of a timeline because of her reincarnation. She basically goes back and lives this life all over again, knowing all the stuff that she knew before. That's one of the interesting things about this reincarnation. She retains the memories of these previous lives and decisions that she made in those times. She's retaining all this. So this is why she ended up being pretty much a genius and having all these things in her mind, was able to open up the Muir Island Research Center and all that stuff and learn about biology. She's a genius, really, not necessarily, not that I'm saying she was dumb at birth, but because of the fact that she's lived so many lives, and she retains all this knowledge, it gives her an advantage. Even from the time that she's a baby in the womb, apparently, she has the ability to start remembering stuff. I mean, so when she becomes a baby, when she starts going into her toddler phase, they talk about how she already was quick to learn to talk and walk and all that stuff because she had already done it before. She's already lived these lives. So it's a very interesting thing, but at the same time, it's like, what does it mean for Powers of X? I guess because of this whole aspect, I guess she's the key to everything, at least from what it seems like when you read this, that Moira McTaggart, a second or third string character, however you would consider her in X-Men, a supporting character basically, might be the key to everything here because of the fact that she is a mutant with these reincarnation powers that can effectively change the course of time because of repeating her life. So it's interesting. I'll say that. But also, I know for some people, things that have to do with changing timelines and stuff like that is just kind of an easy way to do things. But, I'm kind of a sucker for stuff like that. So I'm really interested to see how this will affect everything. Like if there's going to be a chance that those futures that we saw, right, in Powers of X, number one, if those are things that are going to change. Because those seem to be the potential, at least, again, seemingly, from what we've read so far, they seem to be the potential outcome of what is happening within House of X. This future that Xavier has established, along with the X-Men and the other mutants that are with them, seems to be the potential futures of that. But then again, we don't know because of this basically changes everything. So again, I like it, but at the same time, it's just like, let's see how this all shakes out because it's interesting. It definitely has my interest more. And I think that this is by far the best thing I've read so far. But again, I don't know how to feel about it. But one thing that I did like that Jonathan Hickman did was that he added this whole, the many lives of Moira, and it's basically, it goes point by point from each life, right? From life 1, 2, 3, and all that to the 10th one. And it's a timeline of key events that happened at certain ages in her life, everything from establishing the Muir Island Research Center to even her death in those timelines, as well as who her allegiances were in those timelines. Like there's even a timeline, and this, and now I am going to kind of spoil it a little bit here, so I apologize. But there is a timeline where she actually even, at different points in time, she aligned herself with different people. Like in one timeline, she aligned herself with Magneto. And in another timeline, she aligned herself just with Xavier. In another timeline, she aligned herself with even Apocalypse. So she basically tried all these different things, because of, you know, her wanting to try to, her main goal seems to be to try to cure the mutant gene, but then she's like, all right, you know what, maybe that's not the way to go. And then she tries all these other different things, like she's trying to find the right solution to the situation. But there's always, in each one of these timelines, it seems inevitably something bad always happens. So it seems like she's just trying to find the right way to do things, but her reasoning always changes because of things that she experiences in different lives. So that's kind of interesting, because in one timeline, like I said, she was trying to look for a cure for the mutant gene, and another one she decides, you know, mutants aren't the problems, and curing the mutant gene isn't the problem, you know, but humanity's the problem, and all this stuff. So I think that's where it's at finally at this point with the radicalization, is that, you know, mutants aren't the problem, it's humanity that's the problem, and it's trying to figure that out. So it's all, like I said, interesting stuff, and it seems very malleable. So I'm looking forward to the next part of this. I think it's Powers of X number 2 is going to continue the story from here, if I'm not mistaken. But now I'm a little bit more invested. I got to be honest. This is the one that had me more intrigued than the rest. So let me know what you guys think of it. As always, if you guys any recommendations, please let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe if you're not already, and catch you guys on the next one. Until next time, you know how it goes. The hunt continues.